Today we're going to get into something really special, replacing a glass door panel.
So here's our roadmap. We'll start with the pro's mindset, then get into the very specific tools you need. After that, we'll break down the art of taking the door apart the right way, prep everything for a perfect fit, and then walk through the actual installation. And we'll wrap it all up with some final lessons that really define what craftsmanship is all about. So let's kick things off with a pro's meticulous process. You know, before you even think about picking up a tool, the most important work has already started. It's all about getting your head in the right space and doing the most critical prep work first.
And here it is. Before you do anything else, you have to confirm the new glass actually fits. You measure everything, width, height, where the lockbox is, because if that new piece is off by even a 1/16 of an inch, it's not going in. This one step right here saves you from a total disaster later on.
Let's talk tools. And listen, you can't pull off a job like this with the basic kit you've got in the garage. This kind of work demands a specialized arsenal, a whole collection of tools that are chosen, and in some cases even modified for this very specific task. So here's the lineup. We've got a modified heavy-duty mallet, an oscillating tool, a few different knives, suction cups for handling the glass, a tie-down strap for safety, and a very specific adhesive caulk. But I'll let you in on a secret. One of these is the real MVP of the whole operation. And here it is. This is the Hero tool. It starts life as a standard heavy-duty scraper. But here's the key. A pro takes this thing to a grinder and sharpens that edge down to a razor-fine point.
What we want to do is feel for burrs, because as you sharpen one edge, a lot of times the metal gets so thin it'll roll up on the other side. And we don't want that because that'll scratch the glass. So we just want to make sure that our points are nice, just like that.
How often do you need to sharpen this blade?
Some of these are going to be taken off and you won't have to do anything with, but it's just a matter of how tough the trim is on the window and on the door. Like when I'm hitting this and I'm moving this blade up, it's damaging these corners. So that's why those are starting to fold. Of course, when they fold, then they're gonna make that thicker. You're not gonna be able to get it underneath that trim.
So why go to all that trouble? Well, this quote right here explains it perfectly. That factory trim is jammed in there so tight with adhesives and pressure, it's designed to never come apart. A normal blunt scraper is just too thick to even get started. Only that custom sharpened edge is thin enough and strong enough to slip behind the trim and start separating it without destroying it. Okay, with our Hero tool in hand, we can get into the art of deconstruction. This is not demolition. How you take this door apart will 100% determine how well it goes back together.
When you look at these doors, you can see that these little pieces of trim overlap the edge and the center. This particular one has a center dividing mullion here. This one goes from the bottom all the way to the top, single piece. But these smaller ones have to come out first. So we'll take these off, and then we'll come take the center off, and then we'll take the sides off, the top and the bottom. Now this side doesn't have as much of a high profile on the trim, just as difficult to take off and replace. So we're going to do the same thing, install the exact same way, overlapping the center, overlapping the sides, and then take the center off. And this doesn't have any edge. This is where the glass is embedded into on this side of it, but we still have to remove all that caulking. So we'll get to that in just a little while. This is where we're talking about the advantage of having that sharpened edge, is where we can get behind this trim to remove that. A scraper will work, but you don't have the advantage of that handle being held off the door. See how that's held off the door? And that'll save you some time. And you'll want to be careful on this trim, not pry it too heavy, because you will bend it, you'll have to replace it. There's our first piece. I always lay these in order as they're taken off the door, because sometimes they are just a little bit different in widths or lengths, and you want to make sure that you get those back exactly in the same spot.
And this should be the mantra running through your head the entire time. You have to work that sharp scraper in slowly, keeping it as flat as you can against the glass. It's just simple physics, really. That aluminum trim is soft. The second you try to pry it, you'll bend it, and what should have been a simple removal just turned into a massive restoration project.
When you're removing the trim, does it matter which side you start on?
Yes, you want to start on the exterior side first. Some windows don't have mullions on both sides for decoration reason, or just simply the way that they were built.
When removing the glass, is it better to take the door off or leave it in the frame?
Most of the doors that you're going to be replacing the glass in are going to be installed. Occasionally, you will have to pull the door panel off, set it on sawhorses to get the glass out. The bigger the door, the less you want to move it. You don't want to take a great big door off the frame. So if you can keep them in place, installed, and work the glass that way. This part here is a little bit more critical because they've cut half of this top out around this lock block. So it just takes a little bit more delicacy to pull off. So we see we've got that a little bit bent. Because that's aluminum, we can straighten that out. We've got a tiny bow in that, and there may be some in all of it. But with the aluminum, before we put it back, we'll make sure that we straighten those out, pull this back into line, and we'll get the final adjustments later when we put it all back together, but that'll give you an idea what's going on.
What would be the main reason the glass panel needs to be replaced? Cracks, chips, or impact damage?
Occasionally there'll be a manufacturer's defect in the glass from the thermal seal being broken inside the glass, which makes it fail, or somebody hits it and shatters the glass.
What's the safest way to handle a door with shattered glass?
If you have a shattered glass, occasionally you can take and put a film of plastic over it. If both sides are shattered, then you definitely want to protect that by putting an adhesive layer, like a floor protection piece of plastic on it, because they can just completely come apart in your hand. If you've got one side that's shattered, then you can typically get it out of the frame by utilizing that one whole piece of glass with your suction cups, but maintain some carefulness on that. These edges are glued on to the side of the metal and onto the glass. So once we start prying this up, we just need to take that razor knife, start a little slot, take a razor knife, we got to cut that adhesive away from the side, and it's just a piece at a time.
What type of glass do these doors use?
All right, so the doors have a few different types of glass in them. The one we're using today, replacing, is going to be an insulated panel. Many times in the wind areas, they're going to come with a hurricane-resistant glass. Every window is built to the specs of the order, so there's not any mass production of any particular door or window. The windows are wet set with an adhesive caulk at the factory on the backside and the edges for waterproofing.
Are there any additional tips you use when removing the trim to make sure you don't damage the finish?
Yeah, in order to protect the finish as you're taking those off, it's very important to have that sharp blade like we showed you on that angled scraper. Find a spot that the blade can actually start behind it so that you can work that piece of trim and get it off the window. Sometimes, even though you have that blade sharp, there's still not enough room for a sharp edge to go at a certain spot, so you have to find another opening that that blade will go into.
What's the best way to handle and move glass panels during a door repair?
To handle them correctly, always have suction cups with you. They're just designed to take a lot of the work out of glass work. You need suction cups on this replacements.
Are there any shortcuts or faster ways to accomplish these repairs?
To try to save time on these is counterproductive because you're working with finished products, finished surfaces, and glass. So to try to save a bunch of time, you're going to hurt yourself. If in fact that you are able to use this and you want to test it out first, we've got a small section of this loose. So we'll put our knife up behind that, and what we want to do is we want to slide this blade behind that and turn it on. If we're lucky, we can take that right down. Not going to be lucky on this one.
Does the age of the door make it easier or harder to remove the caulk?
Older is harder, yeah, because it has more time to temper. And this door here is probably, I would say, minimum 2 years old, maybe even 3 years old. It's still coming off relatively easy, but not like a brand new door.
Is there a step-by-step approach you follow that makes this process go more smoothly?
Experience is the best teacher here. Once you get one under your belt, you'll learn a little bit how to do it a little easier the next time. And then there's no guarantee that the next one's going to be easier, but you'll have a little experience to say, okay, I can figure this thing out. So all the doors pretty much made the same. And you see we've got a little bit of a bow on that just from taking it out. But again, we'll be able to straighten this one out. And most of the doors with replacement glass will come with new trim, so that if you do damage one beyond repair, you can always cut a new piece to put on. So what we want to do is pry this metal just a little bit up away from that bottom edge so you can get that knife blade in there and cut that caulking that's in there. And then as you cut it, just move this down. There it is. So now that we've got all the trim off, now what we have to do is we have to get the glass out. So we've made a mess, so we need to just kind of clean that line of factory caulking off so that we can see the edge of the glass. That's the edge of the glass. So we'll just remove this caulking. You just start where you can reach. Now that we've got the trim off and we've got the caulking off the edge, we can really see the edge of the glass. Right here, we can do the same thing all the way around. So this is the time to measure your new piece of glass against this piece of glass to confirm again if it's going to fit. So if your new piece is exactly this dimension, and you'll want to take widths, you'll want to go from the top of your lock box on the glass, you can hear that glass edge, and you feel that, to the top of the glass. Double check, make sure that this is the exact same measurement. Repeat from this edge to the inside of the lock box, the length of the lock box. Again, this on the bottom of the lock box, you want to take as many measurements as you can to confirm that that new piece will go into this door. Now, if your new glass is a touch smaller, that's fine, no issues. If it's just, I'm talking just a tiny, tiny bit bigger, you may still be able to get away with it because you've got 1/8 of an inch or less. Rather than taking this window out and discovering that your new glass won't fit, measure, 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 and make sure that that'll set in there. One thing that I do sometimes is I'll take that new piece of glass and I'll actually, now that I have all this edge clean, I'll actually set it up in the hole to make sure it's going to set into the recess. And that's just a nice, simple way to do it rather than having to stop and find out you've made a mistake or somebody's made a mistake on the measuring.
So, the trim is off, but you're not home free yet. That glass is still stuck in there with some seriously tough factory adhesive. So you grab an oscillating tool with a long blade to carefully cut that seal, both on the inside and the outside.
Once we get this side cut, then we're going to go to the back side and we're going to cut the caulking on the other side of the window. This glass is really close to that edge, so it really didn't go in there all the way. And some of these spots, that's where the glass is just not centered into the window, so this is a factory set. So they could have taken a little bit more caution to kick that over, because when you're wedging a tool against a piece of glass, you can crack that glass and it'll just shatter. So now that we're on the inside of the door, you can see on the edge, there's a line of caulk right there. It's siliconized, that's the Dowsil 795 that we were talking about earlier. So what we want to do is we just want to take that and expose as much of that glass as possible. So we're going to take a utility knife and cut all the way around that. And once we've got the edge cut, we'll just take a razor and come down and get that extra off of there. It exposes more of our line here so we can get our tool back in there better. We won't worry about the glass falling out until we start actually taking the tool, oscillating tool, and cutting back here. And when we get the majority of that up, that's when we'll use the tie back to tie around just in case it'll come up. Most of the time they won't fall out at all. It takes quite a bit of work to get them out, but you just don't want one falling out. Now we can actually see, once we got the caulking off of there, there's our set for the window right there. And now we can get that fine tool and just come through there, and then that will release all the glass.
And once it's mostly free, you put a tie-down strap around the whole thing. It's a critical safety step so that big, heavy panel of glass doesn't fall out and surprise you.
Doesn't have to be super tight. We're resting on the hinge on the outside. It can't slip down. All we're doing is tying that off. You see that's already loose? That glass decides to go, that's going to hold it in place. That glass is loose.
What are your options if the replacement glass doesn't fit properly?
When the glass doesn't fit perfectly into the hole, there's really no place to trim. You can't sand a piece of glass out. You can't grind the side of the door. So it's really important to make sure that that glass is the correct size before you take that out prior to that confirmation, because sometimes that glass can be just a 1/16 of an inch too wide and it will not fit into that hole. We're going to take the tie off. With this glass, the way we have it, it's loose in the frame. So what we're going to do is we're just going to lift it up. We're going to leave it behind our security rope. And we're just going to set it down, straight on the ground, clear in this lockbox, and we should be in good shape. Okay, so this is the old window. We've already got it moved out away, and we'll be getting the new one out of the crate, and we'll be putting it in just a little while.
All right, the old glass is out. And now we get to what is, without a doubt, the most critical stage for a professional finish, the prep work. This is all the unseen stuff that really determines the final quality of the job.
To prepare the opening for the new glass, this is what all has to come off. Doesn't necessarily have to be right down too perfectly clean, but we got to get all these lumps out of here. We want that window to be set in the exact same spot as the factory set it. You can't emphasize how critical this step is right here. So you've got everything ready to be replaced just to get all that weathering right. If you don't have this clean, it's not going to weather seal correctly.
And the prep work doesn't stop with the frame. Each one of those trim pieces gets reconditioned. You gently straighten out any little bends. You scrape off every bit of old caulk. You file down any sharp burrs. And then you spray the back with a little flat black paint. That way no ugly scratches or shiny metal bits will be visible through the new glass.
We've got all our trim pieces taken off, and you can see from just the removal, you can see the scratches on the back side. What we're going to do is we're going to take care of that, because once we get that back on the glass, we don't want to be able to see from the other side of the glass any shine in this or any imperfection in the back side of these pieces of trim. So we'll be painting that with just some flat black paint. It'll take away any distraction of any imperfections in the back of that side. And I'm going to show you how to straighten out a couple of pieces of trim that were damaged. Now these are a couple of pieces of damaged, one that I haven't touched yet. So you can see how rough the back is. This is from just taking the scraping off. The shiny parts are the marks that we put on the glass when we were taking it off. And this one actually happens to be pretty straight. So all we have to do on this one, utility knife, and just run it on the back side of this, just to get any lumps of the factory caulking off. And then a file, there's a little bit of a hump right there in the metal. So we just take that off. Make sure there's no burrs or sharp edges, and that one's done. Now this one here is the same thing, and you'll repeat this to all of the pieces. And the reason I want to get all this stuff off here is because any lump left on the back side of this will hold this piece away from the glass a little bit, and that's what we're trying to avoid when we put it back on. We want a brand new bed of adhesive sealant on the back side of these. Now, if you can get a good shot of that, now that's just typical damage. As you pry these things off, they'll bend a little bit. But because it's aluminum, we can straighten that back out with just a little bit of pressure on the back side. Not much, because you don't want to overbend it, and you just continually sight it. And this repairing these is preferred versus cutting new. With the glass, you will have new pieces of molding to put on. Okay, so we mentioned before that sometimes that the mullion pieces on the door are not going to be able to be reused when you take them off. Sometimes they're just way too far damaged. The particular door has 3 different types of mullion strips. This is going to be the outside perimeter of the glass. This is going to actually be put together here, outside corners or anything around the lock blocks, anything like that. Then you've got to meet up with those. This is your perimeter. This is your vertical piece. You see, we've got another angle there. And then if we have a horizontal piece, we have another cut that we're going to have to make there. And then this is the inside trim that balances off the inside mullions to the outside. So what we have to do is, because we have 3 different profiles, we have 3 different cuts. Now, how to cut these, the easiest way is just to have a little tiny crosscut saw. I've got a really fine-tooth blade on here, and you want to use a fine tooth. You can use a plywood blade that's not a carbide tip, but just something with really fine teeth that you can cut that aluminum with ease. You'll see me when I cut this, you'll see that I'm using it very slowly. I'm not forcing this down. Aluminum has a tendency to catch the material as you're going through, but if you do it nice and slow and let the materials get away from the blade as it's cutting, you won't have any problem with it at all. The second way to cut it would be with a grinder with a fine kerf blade on it. You can easily cut aluminum with these, and then you can back grind the angles with an adhesive sanding blade there, and you'll see how I cut those. Then we'll match them, each individual profiles, just to see how they go. So you'll want safety glasses, of course, a file, square, and then just some black touch-up paint. So the first one we'll cut one of these interior horizontal or vertical molds right here. Now these angles here are 31.6 on here. So you just put that against the fence, hold it real tight. All right, always test your cut, and you can see how nice of a clean cut we have right there. So once you get your measurements between your mullions, is just a simple short point to short point measurement. If you're going up against another mullion, if you've got a vertical and you've got several mullions you need to cut in, then it's the same cut over and over and over again. Then the next one will go to the outside corner. Then you can see where that joint has to come back here. We'll start a compound miter, but you can see, we'll get a real close in. So your compound miter is going to start at this line here and go back underneath that trim so that that'll mate up perfectly. So we'll do that. Okay, this will be a 40-degree cut. And you can see how nicely our seams butt up. So this, if you're on the bottom of your window, the bottom piece is going to go stile to stile. Then the lower piece is just going to be mated right down there. Then the last piece we have to cut is your exterior angle pieces, whether they're horizontal or vertical. They'll go either way. So you've got a 40-degree cut to set on your bottom rail. So if this was your vertical piece, the bottom rail, or a horizontal piece, your side rail. And then you're going to just cut this other side here, whatever length you need. So now both sides will fit side to side, or top to bottom, depending on which piece you have to save. So now that's easy way with the machine, or with the crosscut. So if we're going to do that with a grinder, and it's a little bit more tedious, steady your hand, and if you don't have a crosscut, then this is where you're going to be leveraged to cut your piece. So find a stop of some type, and then what you'll do, so we get the angle just roughed in, and then we'll change the blade, and we're going to smooth that up. You can do this on a belt sander that's inverted, but it's all still going to be a matter of just fitting everything. So you can see how clean that is, and we've got a black touch-up spray paint, and that gives you a nice finished edge. So I hope that helps, and we'll go over this briefly here. So what you want to do is, if you have one, the preferred method of cutting the trim is the compound crosscut saw. You saw how easy it is, but carefulness and just taking your time, make sure that you don't have anything that these little pieces right there would snag back on the blade and catch up with you. Second to this would be a grinder. You can do it with a hacksaw, a little bit more time consuming than the hacksaw if you don't have that, but you still need an abrasive disc on your grinder just so you can get those form fit nice. Or you can use a belt sander that's upside down, put it up here, and just be careful with that. But everything is carefulness. Everything is just methodical. Take your time, get it right, and make sure that you have all you need. Any questions? Watch us again. But since these are already cut, we don't want to take the time quicker to repair than it is to go ahead and cut new. Now, you see how straight that is? So that's what you want to end up with right there. Again, no burrs on the back, no excess caulking. Now here's one of the flat ones on the back side of the glass. Little tiny bow got into that one. Gently just work that curve back out of it. The reason it has to be flat is because your glass surface is flat. So you can't have this off because your ends will be sticking out away from the next piece of trim. So we want that nice and clean. Another piece. Now, you don't have to worry about getting all the caulking out of here because it's compatible with the adhesive that we're going to be using to put these back on. So the only important part of it is getting all these little bumps back off of it so it doesn't hold it off the window. Now that was the two different kind of profiles. We had the 45-degree profile for the face of the door, and the flat molding on the inside of the door. And here's another edge piece that goes around. This is the top or the bottom of one of the doors. But because of the prying, you can see the damage that's done. And that's typical, but it's repairable. And I'll go through that with you. Again, taking the extra caulking off. Again, you don't have to take it all off. You're just going to get the majority of it off. So that exposes more of the damage. And here's how we're going to fix that. We'll just take a chisel and a hammer, and we're going to put that chisel on the leading edge of that and hit it. And that gets most of it out. And we're hitting the top of the chisel here so that the impact on that goes inside that groove, takes most of that curve out. Once we get to that point, then we can take the rest of the chisel. And now that we've got that opened up, we just lightly pry, work it out. And the piece is nice and straight, so we'll lay that aside. So now, we've still got some damage on there, and we're going to take care of that damage on the back side. And all we're going to do is just take a flat black can of paint. Just a light dusting, nothing heavy. All we're doing is hiding those bare aluminum scratches. All right, so now we can set these off to the side. It only takes just a few minutes for that to dry. And that's all there is for the back side of it until we start applying the mastic on it and getting it back onto the glass.
All right, our frame is perfect, our trim is perfect. Now for the satisfying part. It's time to install the new glass. This is where all that intense, meticulous prep work really pays off and lets everything come together smoothly.
Now we've got the glass here, we've got our trim taken care of, we're ready to set this glass back in the unit, but there's a couple of very important things. Most people miss is the flexing of this door. The glass actually becomes part of the structural integrity of the door when it's installed. So if you can see, I can move this frame ever so slightly because it's heavy here and nothing in the middle is creating any support. So it's important when you get ready to replace the door that you shim the bottom of the door up so that when you put the glass in, it's not going to move on you. We've got the door shimmed up. It's not going to settle on us. We can go ahead and caulk this end and we'll go through the caulking. So we're going to use a Dowsil 795 and that comes in the sausage tubes and the regular 10-ounce tubes, and we're going to be using a little bit of both on this job. So another critical end in putting the glass insert is you do not want any of the glass touching any of the metal. If the metal expands on the glass, it can crack the glass, break it right out. So we'll use an isolation strip, and you can use anything. You can use anything. This is just kind of a pliable, soft rubber. We're just going to set that right down on the end, 2 places. And we're going to make sure once we caulk that in, when we set the glass on there, that gives us almost 1/8 of an inch of separation on the bottom. So the glass on the inside, we wanted the glass to set about a heavy 1/16 away from this metal. So we're going to put a pretty good sized bead of caulking on the inside. And you don't have to worry about getting too much on because it'll clean right off. And we'll pull those back just a touch. These will just set, we'll cut those off once we get that glass in. All right, give me a hand with this, moving this glass over. Pick it up, set it on the bottom, and then tip it in. Looks good. Good, watch your fingers. Clear. All right, so, yep, so we're gonna press that in, and you can see where the caulking is expanding on the inside. We've got a good seal all the way around. So now the next thing we want to check is the distance between the steel and the glass. Remember, we don't want anything touching that glass. So I got just about 1/8 of an inch all the way around. And we know we've got our spacers on the bottom and we've got the same gap here and here. So our glass is set correctly. Now we'll get a knife and cut those off. Okay, so now to hold that glass in place, we're going to just put a few pieces of tape on the frame, push it into the glass. That keeps the glass in place. And then we can work a few pieces of trim around that. So now as we will start putting our trim on, and one thing we have to do is, you can see the gap between the edge of the steel and the glass. We're going to fill that up with this caulking, and then we're going to overfill that caulking line a little bit, and then we'll put a piece of trim in there, and then we'll tape that trim to it. So as we're doing the top, the bottom, the sides, we'll just be replacing this tape with the trim, and that'll be taped onto the glass also. So we're pre-fitting the trim, make sure that we've got the right piece, because some of these are just not the same. Okay, remembering to fill that gap up, and we're overfilling that hole. And that piece of trim just sets in there. And you see I've got a nice reveal all the way across here. We'll put that piece of tape on so that it won't interfere with the trims that we put on the other side, like that. Okay, same thing. We can do the bottom, filling up that side there, and we'll do a little overfill. Now we don't have to be careful about anything that's running out because that'll clean right off. Yeah, so the tape again, put that in a spot where we can still run this verticals up here, so nothing will be in the way as we take those and put them on. So we can just start stacking trimming. So I'll push that where it's going to be located correctly. Fit up against, snug up against that frame and up against the glass. And we've got a horizontal piece coming across here, so we got to keep that away from that. And you see I'm starting on the glass side, pushing the trim in and rolling the tape around to push that piece of trim up against the frame. So because we're using some of the older trim, I want to make sure that where these old caulking marks and things are going to line up perfectly with these mullions here. And then we're just going to run a piece of this caulking. Of course, that's going to shadow exactly over your division lines in the window. So once we have this held on in place, now we need to make sure that this is separated perfectly from the widths of the trim that we took off before. The caulking needs 24 hours to set so that it won't shift down. So I can still move this because it's all wet. Just make sure all these are the same length, and they are. Adjustment on them. So while we've got these down here, we want to stand back and sight this line. As you sight that, you can see we're a little bit off here. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we adjust these so that both of these pieces are in the same line. This one's still got to come up just a touch. And as you're lining those up, of course we want them to be perfectly aligned with both doors. And while the caulking is wet, plenty of adjustment time. So on a standard door, 8 foot high, single pane, you're going to use half a tube of the bigger sausage and 2 to 2.5 tubes of this 11 ounce. Okay, as I mentioned, on the other side for the center vertical, you want to make sure that before you do any gluing, that you're lining these old marks up, making sure that the top is the top, the bottom is the bottom, and that looks good. Then we can put the caulking on it. I set the bottom right on that lip. I'll just press it into the glass, making sure we're lined up. So a few little odds and ends that we can go over as far as clean up and technical things here. So you can see how much of a mess that the caulking appears to be on the inside, but because that's wet, we don't really want to grab it, smear it around, we don't want to do anything. So we got to wait till that dries. And then we'll come back with a razor knife and we'll slice down, clean that all up really nice, all the way around, wipe off all our mess. And then what we'll do is we'll end up putting a new bead of caulking right down here. If you look at this door here, we got a really nice piece of caulking, and that's what that window will look like once it's done. We cut the excess off and put a nice bead of caulking all the way around the door. Now we've got the glass replaced. We've got the trim back on both sides. We've got it set. We can't do anything too much to it till all this caulking dries. And then we can come in here surgically and cut this extra caulking off and get that out of the way. Like we're doing on the other side, we're going to put a bead of caulking right around these edges here to finish that whole door up. So important thing is let this door set. Do not take it off the shims on the bottom for at least 24 hours. If you're replacing a homeowner's door, make sure that they understand, do not use the door. Make sure that they understand, do not use the door. As soon as they open that door, take the weight and put it on the frame instead of the shim. This has a high possibility of settling back down, and then your door won't function correctly. And once that's done, then if there's any repairs to the door as far as painting, chips, or anything like that, then we'll address them at that time.
After all that, what have we really learned? You know, it really comes down to 3 key things. Patience is everything. Rushing is the #1 mistake. Second, it's about technique, not force. Keeping your tools flat prevents damage. Trying to pry things just creates more work. And finally, a true professional respects the entire space. You protect the floor, you clean up your mess, you treat the job site with as much care as the job itself.
You know you've done it right when nobody can even tell you were there.
And that's really the thought I want to leave you with. The next time you approach any task, big or small, ask yourself this question. Am I just trying to get it done? Am I just making a repair? Or am I taking the time to do it right, with patience and precision?